Thank you for downloading this podcast from Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk. For more podcasts and more information on your number one news and talk station, please visit 702.co.za or capetalk.co.za.
The Naked Scientist on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Riddy Clappy.
Alrighty then, 28 minutes to 10 o'clock. Good morning to you, Chris.
Morning.
Did you say that Thomas makes you... What did you say? I was eavesdropping on your conversation with Thomas.
Oh, that was a private moment between me and Thomas. No, I was saying, when I hear him come on and say, "Hi, Chris, how are you today?" It makes me smile, because I can picture him sitting there with his very large can of fizzy drink, lots of calories. And then he shocked me this morning because he said, "And I'm eating oats." And I said, "This is rather incongruous with your usual lifestyle, Thomas. It sounds like a positively healthy option."
I was about to say that he deserves a tick today because he's eating jungles. But Chris, I was very hungry this morning. I was too late to have breakfast, so I thought I'd share his oats. You know how much sugar he put in there?
Oh, okay. Right, now it sounds about right. That's the Thomas I know and love. Yeah.
And full cream milk and lots and lots of sugar. It tastes like dessert.
It tastes like breakfast, lunch and dinner rolled into one in terms of calories by the sound of it.
Yes.
I think he's a medical miracle, actually. I was just saying, I think we need him as a study subject to work out how an individual, a human, can consume as many calories as that and not get fat.
Just make sure you feed him afterwards. He'll agree to that study. All right, I've got an interesting question here from Buleng, and yes, I've often wondered about this myself. She asks, "I'd like to know why one feels like one's tongue, gums, lips and cheeks are swollen after one has received local anesthetic at the dentist, even though there's no swelling."
Okay, I've never been asked that before, and I've never really thought of it. I actually, thinking back, I had to have some teeth taken out when I had my milk teeth. I still had loads of milk teeth when I was about 14. And so the dentist said, "Well, I'll have to have some of these out because it's going to discourage the other stuff from coming through." Ended up with no teeth for ages. But yes, you're right. It does feel rather strange. I think it's probably because of the way that we normally have signals coming in from all different parts of the body telling us where the different bits of our tissues are in relation to each other. And I think that the brain compares the signals from one part of the body and the signals from the other part of the body that think they know where that first part of the body is. And you subtract one from the other and have a coherent picture in your mind of where all the parts of your body are. And if there's no signal coming in from one region, then you only get half the signal, the other bits of the body saying where they think the thing is, and there's nothing coming from the structure itself. And I think that leads to a sort of disparity in your mind's eye of the internal model you build of your body in space. So it makes the thing feel much bigger than it really is. Another weird illusion, and this happens to some people, but not everyone. Maybe everyone can try this, okay? If you run your tongue along your teeth in the front of your mouth, and you can feel the gap between the upper and lower jaw. Just try that. With me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Now turn your tongue so that it's sideways. Okay. So that effectively your tongue is pointing 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock rather than 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And repeat that. Run your tongue up and down your teeth. Now, some people say that they experience a sensation in their mind's eye of their teeth now being vertical. Definitely happens to me. It feels like my teeth have turned through 90 degrees and they're now going up-down rather than left-right. I bet you if we ask people, text us if you are experiencing, or you can tweet at Naked Scientist, tell us, and we'll tot them up if you get the teeth vertical funny sensation in your mind's eye. I think that's part of the same phenomenon.
Oh, no, you know, Chris, now I'm not going to concentrate as I try to achieve this before we wrap up the show. Look what you've started. Okay, let's go to Peter in Centurion. Hi.
Hi, ready? Keep Peter Lope.
Hi, Peter. Fine, thanks.
I'm fine, thanks. I just wanted to question Chris. Upper Cape Worms, I was reading somewhere and I was watching a video where they said almost everything that we eat is got tapeworms, especially sushi and, but tapeworms. Mm-hmm. What is the story with tapeworms and the prevalence of people to catch?
Okay, tapeworms. Yeah. So are they in everything we eat, and how do they get into your body? Okay, Chris?
Hi, Peter. I sincerely hope they're not in everything we eat. And the fact is that the vast majority of populations of countries that have good quality food and hygiene, the prevalence is lower. In very, very poor countries where people tend to have poor access to clean water and clean food, then obviously the rates go up. So it depends on where you live very much. The way these worms work, there's a whole range of different parasitic worms. There are worms which actually burrow through your skin. So these hookworms that latch onto the intestine and drink blood, they're slightly different from tapeworms. They live in the environment, so you shed those worms in feces, they sit in the environment, and then when someone comes along, the worms can sense that there is someone nearby, they activate, latch onto the skin, drill through the skin, go up to the lungs, mature in the lungs, get coughed up, get swallowed, latch onto the inside of your intestine and drink your blood. Those are a different kind of worm, a hookworm. There are roundworms and tapeworms. The tapeworms are interesting because they are like a tape, and they can be metres and metres long, and they're segmented, and each of the segments has got an individual like a uterus, which makes progeny, and the worm detaches these segments and they go off, and then they land in the environment, and then if you pick up one of those sets of eggs, you can bring them into your body. Other worms do other nasty strategies where they make your bum itch, and they lay eggs around your bum. So usually when you're sleeping, you scratch your bum to alleviate the itch, pick up the eggs under your fingernails, and then in the morning when you get up and sort of scratch your nose and lick your lips and pick your teeth, the eggs go back in and you auto-infect, which is not terribly nice. But in terms of actually what you can pick up from food, depends on where you get your food from. And, I mean, one of the other things to bear in mind is the bug toxoplasmosis. Now, this is not a worm. It's another kind of parasite that's actually involved with cats. But you can get cysts of that in food. And if you don't cook your meat properly, you can pick up toxoplasmosis. And this causes a sort of flu-like illness. So the answer is cook your meat properly and get it from a reputable source.
Yeah, Peter, stay away from those uncooked meats and so on. But, Chris, is it true then that tapeworms are more prevalent in your uncooked meats, especially pork, if it's not cooked properly? That's what I learned at school.
Well, you can definitely get more parasites in meat that is ill-prepared and ill-kept. And if you cook it properly, you should deactivate the infectious forms, and these forms that can get into the meat in sort of cysts and then get into you for various parasites. And so the rule is you should always cook these meats properly. Pork is a good one. If you cook that properly, you will get rid of the parasite burden. But you mustn't eat meat that's undercooked anyway. It's a good idea to have it well cooked because that will stop the risk.
Okay, let's go to Judy in Midrand. Hi there, Judy.
Hi, Chris. I was watching a program on London taxi drivers that a certain part of their brain is enlarged because they have to learn all the streets. If they move to a GPS system, will that part of the brain atrophy?
Wow, that's a brilliant question, Judy. And in fact, the lady who did that study, her name is Eleanor Maguire. She's a researcher funded by the Wellcome Trust at University College London, and I was speaking with her just the other day, funnily enough, because you're right, she did this amazing study more than 10 years ago now, where we know that the brain seems to be able to respond and change its structure in response to our experience. And so she wondered, if you take a group of individuals who have to do a very intensive navigational learning task, like learning 25,000 streets of London, and then you look at their brains, will they have a bigger part of the brain that's concerned with navigation, this being a structure called the hippocampus? And sure enough, when she looked, she found that people who had successfully passed the knowledge, which is the exam that taxi drivers have to do have a much bigger hippocampus volume compared with an average person selected at random from the population. But the big question was, do people who pass the knowledge just have a bigger hippocampus to start with, or does it become bigger in the course of doing the knowledge? And she recently returned to this subject and published the definitive results of a study in which they answered that question. It was in the journal Current Biology around about last Christmas, and they took taxi drivers, scanned them before they did this knowledge, then they followed them up as they did all of the learning tasks and learned the maps of London, and then they rescanned them again at the end of having passed the knowledge, and they found a very significant increase, not universally and uniformly through this hippocampus structure, but in just one part of the hippocampus, the part that does coincide with learning how landmarks relate to each other in spatial orientation and position. So her argument is that this is the brain adapting to the pressure of having to learn these things. But were they to then go somewhere else, they would have to obviously start from scratch learning these landmarks again. But I think the argument would be, if you were to have to try and learn things, if you already have a map, or a part of the brain organised to learn maps very well, I think it would probably facilitate taking on board those maps over and above someone who was starting from scratch. But then again, there's another question there, which is, do people who successfully pass the knowledge and grow their brain in this way, are they equipped with a brain that's capable of endowing itself with a better mental map to start with? So it doesn't really get us any closer to the answer, but I think they probably would find it easier to learn regardless.
Brilliant question, Judy. Thank you very much. KW, Andrew Takalani, stay on the line. I'm coming to you right after this.
The Naked Scientist on Talk Radio 702 and 567 Cape Talk with Riddy Clappy.
And it is 9:45. We are taking your questions. 021-446-0567, 011-883-0702. Let's go to Andrew in Brooklyn. Hi.
Hello, good morning. It's a straightforward question. In our solar system between Mars and Jupiter, we have the asteroid belt. Now, we have been told and we read that a sun or a solar system to be formed, it forms out of a cloud of dust. Now, that kind of dust, does it contain like asteroid belts we have in our solar system of asteroids from 300 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers long?
Hello, Andrew.
Hi there.
You are absolutely right that sitting between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter is a big aggregation of material which range in size from tiny specks and pebbles right up to enormous bodies which are hundreds of kilometres, and in one case series maybe 1,000+ kilometres across. And some of those bodies have been there and will remain there indefinitely. Others have been dislodged and have interacted with the Earth in the past and probably wiped out the dinosaurs about 60 million years ago. We know from models that people have done that various resonances, nudges from other solar system objects, including the giant planets, have dislodged some of these objects, and also the pressure of sunlight falling on them has given them a nudge and caused some of them to move out of the asteroid belt. In fact, there was a paper in Nature a few years ago by a guy called Bill Botke, in which he found that you could trace back some of the impactors that probably did away with the dinosaurs to objects that were out there beyond Mars back in history. In terms of where they come from, we think, or our current models of how the solar system forms, is along the lines that you suggested. So you have a very big object in the centre, a protostar, which is going to form, in our case, the Sun, and around that is a disk of material called a protoplanetary disk. And because of conservation of angular momentum and various equations, this goes from being a big shroud around the protostar to a flat disk around its equator, a bit like the rings of Saturn. And under the influence of gravity and time, particles in that disk slowly begin to coalesce or attract one another, and they aggregate and accrete. And you initially form little bundles of material, which are planetesimals, and then they become more gravitationally active because they're bigger, they attract other material, and you have bigger and bigger bodies, and eventually you end up with the situation we have now, which is you have rocky worlds in closer to the Sun, and we have gas giants out further in the orbits around Saturn and Neptune, and Uranus and so on. And between Mars and Jupiter, there is all this debris, which some people suggest is a failed planet. Effectively, it's material that never managed, because of various gravitational reasons, to accrete into a planet in its own right, and it has remained as a mixture of the dust and debris from which actually the rest of the bodies in the solar system were made.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Does that answer your question? Very interesting. Thank you. Lovely. And Takalani, thank you. You've been so patient in Johannesburg. Hi.
Hi, Riddy and Chris. Chris, I just want to know, why is it usually the lower lip which get checked?
Oh, yeah, it's true. It is, eh?
Hello, Takalani. I can identify with that one, I tell you. I think Well, in my case, I'm certainly a sort of chap-lip type person. I suspect it's probably because it does more moving than the upper lip, and therefore if it's doing a bit more moving and is slightly more prominent, it probably has a bigger surface area. Therefore, if it's got a bigger surface area, it's got a bigger area to get chaps on it. So a combination probably of more movement and a bigger surface area, I'd guess, but I don't know for sure. I'm guessing.
You're more likely to bite your lower tongue than your upper. I'm trying to bite my upper. I've got all these interesting experiments today with the tongue and the teeth.
I hadn't thought of that.
I'm not able to bite my top lip at the bottom. I do that very well. Thanks, Takalani. Thank you. Let's go to, is it KW in Panorama?
Yes.
Okay. Can you speak up, please? Your question.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, Reddy. I'm a pirate. And good morning to Chris.
Welcome. Yes.
Yes. I want to know from Chris, early morning, about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, the birds chirp. What do they speak to one another? I'm referring to the small birds.
Yes, the dawn chorus. Yeah, or when I was staying in a hostel, I was in Australia, in Queensland, and my brother had come to stay, and my wife's best friend had come to stay, and we were staying in this hotel in North Queensland, sleeping soundly, and then suddenly there was a very noisy bodily function from my brother's side of the room, and then another one, and it was obvious what was going on, and this friend of my wife suddenly sat up and said, "It's so lovely to be woken to the sound of the dawn chorus." It wasn't the kind of bird singing chorus that she had in mind there. Why birds do this? Well, it's, as you say, it's singing, it's a form of communication. Birds, we communicate by talking to each other, birds communicate to each other by singing. They're announcing their territory, they're announcing their relationship to each other, they're telling each other they're around, they all watch each other, they learn from each other, they detect danger by listening to the calls of other birds and their close mates. And so when they all wake up together, then they all sing together, and it's actually pretty much linked to the time of day.
Yes.
There are various studies that have been done showing that if you put street lights out, you can disturb the normal rhythms of birds, and they actually wake up earlier. Birds in towns, they've found, wake up at an earlier time and start singing than birds in the countryside, because in towns there's more artificial light, and it fools the birds' body clocks into thinking it's time to wake up. And they're just programmed to make an early start of it each day, unfortunately. When I was in Aberdeen last week, when I spoke to you from there, up in the north of Scotland, seagulls would come and make the most enormous racket sitting on my windowsill every morning. And their noise was tremendous. It's 5 o'clock in the morning every day. Until the last day, they seemed to take Saturday off.
No, I was about to say, Chris, they seem to be particularly active. Maybe it's because during the week when they wake up and start calling each other, I'm out of the house. I get up quite early, 4:15.
Oh, that must be it then.
On Saturday mornings, that is when I sleep in until about 7. But no, it never happens, because as sure as sunrise at 10 to 5 o'clock, it's the hardy-das in my yard, on my roof, all over the trees at 5. I even tweeted about it just last week. I said, will you bloody hardy-das please shut up? I want to sleep.
It's ironic that you tweeted about it, though, isn't
it? Just 6 days ago, because I really wanted to sleep, but they just decided they own the territory, and that's it. Let's go to Mihai in Montana. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to comment something on the space stations and the meteorites.
Yeah?
Or rather, asteroids. It is absolutely funny how we humans go and create these space stations with direct raw material from Earth and put it all the way up on high-level rockets. It's very economically expensive and environmentally. My thought is to capture one of these 500 meters asteroids and simply bury and drill into it and create tunnels and then insulate it and then use it as a space station. The maintenance factor wouldn't have to be considered, because it's just a big lump of rock. Also, the astronauts would be protected from the radiations.
What do you think of that suggestion, Chris?
I think you should write to NASA. They're a great idea. The only thing is, Mihai, and it is a good idea, it's a good suggestion, the only problem is that the asteroids are not where we want them to be. The space station is just, effectively in space terms, a gnat's whisker away from the surface of the Earth, whereas the asteroids are out beyond Mars. So in order to get one and bring it back here so we had it conveniently near to Earth, in other words like a second surrogate moon, we would have to go out there beyond the orbit of Mars, which is about a 3-year space journey. You get one, persuade it to come back with us, and then put it safely somewhere near the Earth where we could keep it. Then you've got the mining equipment. How do you actually drill into it in the first place? Well, that would take quite a lot of equipment and energy. You've got to get that up there. So all told, there's no simple way of doing this, but you raise a really important point, which is that it costs enormous amounts of money for every just simple kilogram of material that we take from Earth up into space. And in order to circumvent this problem, some people are suggesting that were we to build some kind of base on the moon, then we could use the raw materials that are on the moon to build at least a proportion of the things we needed, and also we'd be launching other craft then from the moon rather than from the Earth. And because the moon is smaller than the Earth, you don't have such a high escape velocity. You don't have to give a spacecraft such a big push to get off the moon as you do from the Earth, and this could save us some energy in the long run. But again, there's enormous amounts of infrastructure cost in the first place to set something up like that. But it is a very important consideration that you've raised, and one that I think that people are looking seriously at, certainly for the future.
All right, Mihai, write to NASA, and when you become famous, don't forget where it all started. Somebody wants to know, Chris, if you believe in UFOs.
Difficult one, that, because, what's speculation and what's reality. But what I absolutely believe is that we are not alone in the universe. The current estimates for how many stars there are in the universe is something like 10 to the 22. A sextillion stars. So in other words, there are, in the Milky Way, just our cosmic neighbourhood, the Milky Way's got a couple of 100 billion stars in it, and we think there's a couple of 100 billion galaxies. And each of those galaxies with a couple of 100 billion stars has got 10 or so planets around each star, on average. So in other words, the numbers of opportunities or possibilities for having another Earth-like planet or a place where life could get started, I think it's almost inevitable. So it's almost certain that there is other forms of life out there somewhere. We just haven't come across them yet. Whether or not they've taken the opportunity to come visit us, don't know for sure. And it might be that they know about us, they're far more advanced than we are, and that we're a convenient experiment, a bit like us going to the zoo to look at animals. They pop by here now and then and have a look how we're getting on.
Very interesting. Chris, we chat again next week.
Thanks, Reedy. Have a nice weekend.
Ta-ta.
And bye, everybody. See you soon.
Bye-bye.